You're very welcome again, Chris.
Thank you. Everything working okay? Yep. Thank you for hearing us and hopefully having read our written deputation, which is where we set out in more detail than we could in the time today, our arguments. We referenced in that written deputation another written deputation we and 6 other groups had sent to this committee in 2022. I'm aware that there are a number of faces have changed since then, so I'll just refer back to that, which was the basis of arguing that the case for 777 bus lanes. And I'm also aware of Spokes' written deputation today. I'm not going to address the issue of bicycles in bus lanes, but I thought there were some salient points that Spokes made in what they had to say. So the problem is that what we have is a good report that's spoiled by recommendation 1.14 to approve trialling of private hire car access to bus lanes. We set out in our written deputation at some length the history, going back to 2014, of how bus lanes had been, the operating hours of bus lanes had been cut, which in our view was a mistake. And also the length of bus lanes has been consistently pared back over the years since then. We made the point about what was in the party manifestos, all the parties that were elected to the council, not as a party political point. The point was simply to show that every party that has been elected to this council was elected on a manifesto commitment that said we will support and promote bus use. And in fact, in 2022, I think it was Councillor Booth proposed a motion which was agreed unanimously by the council, which was, well, we get into quite a lot of detail here and probably not the time, but it argued strongly for progressing things at pace. And in December 2022, this committee approved a business bulletin motion about bus lanes, neither mentioned wider access. This year, 2024, approved a plan with 3 actions to extend bus lane hours and additional bus priorities. It also referred to private hire car, actions related to private hire cars. They were about strengthening taxi and private hire car partnerships on zero emissions and technology. Nothing about bus lanes. Congestion has increased Edinburgh bus journey times by up to 20%. And they've risen. Edinburgh's not unique. Bus times have risen by almost 1% per year across the UK, and that's largely responsible for declining bus use. And now, finally, we have a proposal to progress to reinstate bus lane hours, but the report proposes to undermine it. Not only that, it also says reintroduce, effectively, private hire cars to Princes Street, and I have to question whether it's really thought through on that front. Given the past history, I mean, this is one of our kind of particular problems here. Given the past history of supposed red lines and undertakings or understandings that have been given about bus lanes, why would we believe, as a group, that any red lines, well, we'll just let private hire cars in here and that'll be the end of it? It is difficult to believe any assurances now that we would receive on the future of bus lanes. The argument that private hire cars should have similar access to hackney cabs overlooks the fact there are different regimes that apply to both. Scottish Government guidance refers only to licensing regimes. It doesn't say all forms of transport should be treated the same. I could cite Transport Scotland guidance saying bus lanes should be for buses and perhaps for cycles. Lothian Buses is owned by the council, I'm sure you know that. It provides a level of service because it's commercially successful. If it wasn't commercially successful, the shareholder councils would either have to subsidise it...
Chris, can you start winding up now, please?
Yes, or let it decline. There is no chance of... in the current financial climate of that being done adequately. Why is it that after years of stasis, or worse, on the issue of timeliness and reliability, a small step forward is clawed back? We don't believe this proposal meets the motions that councillors have previously agreed, either in letter or in spirit. So we therefore ask that the committee delete recommendation 1.14, paragraph 4.26, and progress the rest of the report.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'm not going to comment on how good or bad your deputation was. Do you have any questions? Councillor Booth and then Councillor Aston.
Thanks very much indeed, Convener. And just to correct one point, I initially raised the issue of 77 bus lanes in 2018, so this has been going on for 8 years. Chris, you touched in your deputation on the impact that allowing PHCs, private hire cars, into bus lanes might have. Can you go into a wee bit more detail, specifically on the impact that you think that might have on buses and on the reliability and journey times of buses, please?
Well, I mean, as anyone can see, just one vehicle. I mean, I think in one of the documents that was submitted, there was reference to the volume of PHCs that you could expect to see. I mean, one vehicle, and constantly see it, just one vehicle in a bus lane blocks the bus lane. So, no, it hasn't been quantified. I would accept that point. The problem fundamentally, and what I was trying, had I organised this myself a bit better, I would have said is, how can we believe it's partly an issue about salami slicing or chipping away? What we have seen is, but consistently over the years, is bus lanes being pared back in operating hours and in length and so on. And I know there are a host of other commercial interests that want access to bus lanes, freight, network rail, people who drive samples around. If you don't draw a red line now, why would we believe any supposed red line that you might draw in future? It's not just down to a single, well, it is down to the potentially a single vehicle can hold up a bus lane depending on what it's doing. I don't have the data on that. My instinct is that 10 years ago, the council allowed motorcycles into bus lanes, hasn't quantified the effect of that. Now you're proposing to allow private hire cars into bus lanes. That hasn't been quantified. It's kind of a movable feast. Sorry, I made a mess of answering that question, but...
I don't think we've got any more questions for you. Oh, very quick, sorry, Danny, I forgot. Councillor Aston, sorry.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Chris, for the deputation. Do you think it would have been better if, rather than trialling 777 on just one bus route, it had been done on a citywide basis?
Well, that's the way Greenways was done, almost from way back in the 1990s. I'm old enough to remember that. Yes, I understand that a lot of people are frustrated with the lack of progress. I'm frustrated with the lack of progress. I think, unfortunately, we now live in a world, a small p political world, where these things inevitably tend to progress step by step. Yes, I would be happy if every bus lane was 777 tomorrow. I don't think that's realistically likely to happen. But if you want to agree that today, I would be absolutely happy with that. There was just another point in there that I think I was going to touch on, but it escapes me now. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you. I should also say
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Continuing item 3.4, in relation to the item 7.6, trial of the 77 bus lanes, we have Uber next. We've got Matthew Freckleton and Harrison Kay.
Welcome back.
Hello, thank you. Good morning, everybody. For those that don't know me, my name is Matthew Freckleton. I'm the head of cities for Uber UK. I look after all our regulatory relationships with councils outside of London. Dear convener and councillors of the Transport Environment Committee, Uber supports the proposed trial as outlined in section 7.6 to allow private hire cars to access the bus lane within the corridor of the experiment. We believe that allowing private hire cars to access bus lanes in the City of Edinburgh will create a more efficient transport network. Private hire cars are part of the wider transport network and should have equal access along other forms of passenger transport. It will improve the passenger experience, increase driver sentiment for their work in Edinburgh, provide an uplift to passenger transport networks, help realise sustainability targets by reducing congestion, improve public safety and access, particularly for vulnerable people. With access to bus lanes, private hire cars will be able to get their passengers where they need to go more efficiently due to shorter journey times, and private hire car passengers will naturally benefit from lower fares. In Uber's recent 2024 UK-wide driver roadshow, where Uber UK senior leadership team meet with Uber drivers across the country, at the event hosted in Edinburgh, access to bus lanes was continually raised as a pain point by drivers. We are campaigning collaboratively on this issue with our union partners GMB. Jointly, we believe that once a passenger has been picked up and is en route to their destination, the role of a private hire car is identical to any other form of on-demand transport, transporting the public along the shortest possible route. This is directly mentioned in section 197 of the Edinburgh City Council and Private Hire Car Policy, which states the driver shall drive to the destination by the shortest practical route unless otherwise instructed by the hirer. Allowing access to bus lanes will allow private hire car drivers to comply more efficiently with this policy. Providing private hire car access to bus lanes will increase public confidence in using transport networks, moving away from private car usage. This will in turn help with the city's sustainability goals by providing residents with reliable alternative modes of transport. Thus, more people will choose multimodal journeys over their own private car. We have seen in other cities around the world where the removal of access to a road can lead to negative impacts on transport networks. In an Uber Amsterdam study in 2023, the removal of access to a single major city road elongated trips by distances between 20 and 30% and duration by between 30 and 60%, thus creating an inefficient network by increasing vehicle emissions and increasing fares due to longer trips. For comparison, the most recent other council in the UK that has conducted a bus lane trial was Portsmouth City Council, which concluded a 14th-month trial earlier in 2024, allowing private hire cars to use 5 bus lanes in the city. During this time period, there was no impact on air quality on these bus lanes, no increase in junction times, no increase in road safety incidents, and no impact on the bus timetable. The report is public, but I'm happy to share it with committee members through the convener. Councillor Vernon Jackson, the Cabinet Member for Transport, said, private hire vehicles provide essential transport in the city, especially for those travelling in groups or for those that can't catch the bus, walk or cycle. Developing and improving the reliability of public transport is essential for our residents and businesses in Portsmouth, whilst also ensuring the safety of road users when making changes in the city. Portsmouth Council is now looking to provide access for private hire cars across another 10 bus lanes in the city. Uber has supported Portsmouth Council with this trial by providing relevant and anonymised trip data, and we are happy to do the same here in Edinburgh. In conclusion, Uber supports the proposed trial, and we look forward to continuing to work closely and positively with Edinburgh City Council on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Very concise, which is always appreciated. Do we have any questions for Matthew? Councillor Booth.
Can you just clarify, are private hire car vehicles defined as public transport in your view?
I'd refer back to my statement. I think, when somebody has chosen their form of transport, be that a bus, a cycle, a walk, an Uber, the purpose of that mode of transport is to get that person to their destination as quickly, as efficiently as possible. Not everybody in the city can access a bus or cycle or get to a hackney rank. If you are disabled or in a wheelchair, the only form of transport you might rely on is a private hire vehicle, potentially.
Councillor Dobbin.
Thank you. Thank you for your deputation. In terms of if private hire cars are in a bus lane or are able to use the bus lane and the bus is stopped, what's the expected behaviour of the private hire car? Do we treat the separation, the white line, the thick white line, as a double yellow, or do you anticipate drivers will kind of weave in and out?
I don't think the driver in charge of the vehicle, will abide by whatever the traffic rules and regulations are on the road. So it'll be up to the driver. I don't think I'm going to sit here and comment on how a driver might take each individual situation.
So, Matthew, I've had quite a lot of contact about this proposal since the report went into public domain last week. So just to explore a couple of points that have been raised. The first is that people say that a lot of private hire car vehicles in the city are often also family vehicles. So people are part-time private hire car drivers, and the rest of the time they're using a car to take their kids to school and go to the shops and all the rest of it. And the other thing is that people are saying that some private hire car drivers, as well as moving people about, they also deliver food for Uber Eats and other services. So I wondered if you knew how many of your registered drivers in Edinburgh had that kind of part-time operation where their car was also a family car, and also how many of them doubled up as Uber Eats drivers.
Yeah, I don't know how many of our drivers will be using their vehicle as the main mode of transport for the family. Yes, we have Uber Rides and Uber Eats as a business, but we are very much two separate businesses, so I just focus on the Uber Ride side of the business, so I don't have that information to hand on Uber Eats.
But there is then potential that Uber drivers who are PHC drivers would be using bus lanes to move curries around the city. So it'd be a curry lane rather than a bus lane.
If there was a situation of that or a report of that, then we would expect that to be reported to the council, potentially as a complaint. Council can contact us. We could identify that driver and that in our system, inform the council of that information. And if the council wanted to take regulatory action against that driver for inappropriate use of a bus lane, they could do that.
Councillor Neil, you had a question. The Greens have asked a question already, I'm really sorry.
It's a really quick follow-up from Councillor Booth.
I'm getting in trouble because Councillor Booth will quote the standard
He
order.
will, that's true.
Sorry, Councillor Lang.
Thanks. You mentioned Portsmouth. I think it's quite an interesting example to use. I'm just trying to understand the comparability of Portsmouth because it's probably about a third the size of Edinburgh. I've had a look, actually, at how many bus services they've got. I think they've got 14 bus services in their entirety serving the city. I had a quick count through Lothian buses alone, and I got to 94 different services. Is that really a relevant example to compare against?
I appreciate Portsmouth City is at the other end of the country, and no two cities are alike, but it is the most recent example of another city council conducting bus lane travel, so it did seem relevant for that point. Through some basic desk research that we have conducted, other cities in the UK which allow private hire cars access to bus lanes include Brighton and Hove, Cambridge, Peterborough, Cardiff, Glasgow, Hull, Liverpool, Newcastle-on-Tyne, Sheffield, Southampton, Newcastle-under-Lyme, Stoke-on-Trent, and Portsmouth.
So thank you, Matthew, for coming along, and I think we're about to hear further comments on this paper. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I will ask Kevin Woodburn from Capital Cars and Inner City Management to come down.
And bring down them all. Bring down Colin. Sorry.
Can I also ask that Colin Dodds from GMB Union and Stuart Livingston from Scottish Private Hire Association also Thank you.
So all three of you are very welcome. What we'll do, we'll take your presentation one at a time. We'll just move from Kevin through, and then we'll take questions to all three of you at the same time, if that's okay.
Good morning, committee. First of all, thanks very much for accepting my 20-minute late deputation the other day there. That was very good of you, so thanks, convener. I will not sit here and just read out everything that has been put in my deputation. I don't want to, waste the committee's time. You've all read what I've had to say. I just want to highlight some of the more relevant points. Private hire taxis in this city perform a public transport function on a daily basis. And regardless of whether alluding to the fact that in legal terminology it may not be classed as public transport, as Councillor Booth's question earlier alluded to, there is nobody in this room that does not understand, or should not understand, I should say, the services that private hire vehicles provide in this city. There are approximately 250,000 journeys a week in private hire taxis and hackney taxis. Currently, private hire is somewhere in the region of 160 to 170,000 of those journeys. I would argue that the way that everything has been formed lately in terms of reports and in terms of amendments that have been published this morning, it would suggest that we think everybody's going to be able to get around in either a bus, a tram, or a bicycle. I've listened for 20-odd years to people's opinions in this room based on no fact. Everything is based on opinion. We have had absolutely no support ever, other than from one group within this council, and I will say that is the Conservative group, who have always pushed for the support of businesses. And effectively, every single driver that is out there, whether they are driving with a mobility passenger, whether they are carrying members of the public, whether they are carrying members of your family, or indeed whether they are delivering curries, as was just alluded to a moment ago, is a licensed private hire driver who contributes a lot of money to this city and provides a fantastic service to the citizens of this city, who are the people who vote for everybody in this room. And I find some of the comments that have been made either in the press or in these rooms absolutely astounding. So, facts. The report that's in front of you today is based on fact, not based on opinions. Data was provided to the officers some 2.5 years ago on specific movements of private hire vehicles. Now, I understand why people have opinions, but the whole point of this report is to provide more data, facts, not opinions, not whether people think somebody will sit in a bus lane if a bus is stopped at a bus stop. Will they turn? Will they go round it? What will they do? Who knows? But what does a taxi do at the moment? What does a cyclist do at the moment? What does a motorcyclist do at the moment? Nobody has that data. Why? That is the whole point of this report. And it seems to have been missed that this trial operation is to gather that data so that you can then make an informed decision going forward, not just whatever your opinion might be on any given day. And to me, that's where this whole situation is headed, that we once again are sitting here talking about people's opinions. I won't go any further, because I'm trying extremely hard to keep calm, but suffice to say, I would like to end my deputation by saying thank you to Councillor Arthur for his time on this committee. and congratulations on being elected to Westminster. I, for one, am delighted that you're going to Westminster. And as I said, I would like to say congratulations and thank you for your time on this committee. I just can't bring myself to do it. So, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Kevin. Stuart, you're next. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Bit of an echo chamber here, maybe, but I'll just read out the deputation as it was. The Edinburgh branch of the Scottish Private Hire Association calls on the committee to include a trial access for private hire cars as part of the proposed 777 bus lane trial. Taxis and private hire cars are often recognised as an integral part of a city's mass transit system. Indeed, in responding to an SPHA petition, the Scottish Government recently said that it, quote, recognises the important role that private hire and taxi drivers play within our local communities and that the services provided are a vital part of the transport system. On this point, it has been argued that private hire cars are part of the solution, not part of the problem. Furthermore, both taxis and private hire cars are licensed by the City of Edinburgh Council to perform licensable activities as set out in the Civic Government Scotland Act 1982. With the exception of the fact that taxis are permitted to engage in there and then hires, the licensable activities for both are broadly similar. Meanwhile, taxis have been permitted to have access to bus lanes, while private hire cars have not. We ask that this inequitable approach be changed so that both forms of transport have equal access to service as city. In looking to see if allowing private hire cars to have access to bus lanes would have negative or positive effects, we should look to comparable examples. The best comparison is probably Glasgow. Private hire cars in Glasgow have been permitted access to bus lanes for over 20 years, and in all that time there have been no attempts or campaigns to overturn or reverse that decision. There does not appear to be negative effects leading to questions being raised over whether such access should continue. That in itself is quite telling. Many claims have been made in regards to private hire car access to bus lanes and bus gates over the years, with proponents making various claims of possible positive benefits and opponents making claims of possible negative benefits. A trial on 777 bus lane operation provides an excellent opportunity for a simultaneous trial on private hire car access. Taking advantage of this opportunity will allow data to be collected on the impacts of private hire car access to the bus lanes, which will then allow evidence-led decisions to be made on the matter. By trialling private hire car access, we will be able to put facts against the claims being made by those on both sides of the argument and come to the conclusions based on the real-world and tried and tested effects of private hire car access, either positive or negative, whatever the case may be. We call on the committee to include private hire car access to bus lanes during the 777 bus lane trial. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Colin.
I'm not going to repeat the previous. I feel as if I'll be repeating the previous deputations, especially from Kevin Midburn into City Management. I can only say that being a Hackney badge taxi driver, I can work with both Hackney taxi and private hire. For me, it's about the Disabled Persons Act 2022, taxi private hire. At present time, you are discriminating against passengers and riders who cannot use the London type vehicle. And I've put it in my deputation about the Disabled DPAC, Disabled Passenger Committee, UK, stating that there is no 100% wheelchair accessible vehicle at the present time. Absolutely zero. And also, the issue about wheelchairs, private hire do take wheelchair, people who use wheelchairs, not permanently, naturally, but people who want to put the wheelchair or any form of electric wheelchair into the back of the car and assist them into the back seat of the car. That happens daily. So wheelchair users do use private hire cars. In the future, hopefully, we will be part of the public transport, recognised as public transport, because we provide, how can I say, an exceptional service, and a service to people who want to have a door-to-door service throughout the day, and especially ones who lack mobility, and also people who live in areas who can't access buses, primarily South Queensferry, Crimond, the outer reaches, who who actually get dropped off at bus stops and parking rides and go into trams, etc. So we are part of the jigsaw to reduce congestion. And I have to say, I'm absolutely delighted that yourself is actually being elected as an MP. I am so delighted, and I'm sure the GMB union is delighted as well. Okay, so thank you for listening, and I really have to refrain from what I'm going to say, because I am so frustrated because of my experience with private hire and doing hackney taxis, working in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and I know how important it is for transport for disabled persons who lack mobility. And one person said to me one time, why can someone who lack mobility can they not walk from Princess Street to the pickup centre? That's a great. So I have to stop because I'm so frustrated.
Councillor Monroe, then Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you very much for coming along and giving your deputations today and your views. It's just a couple of things. Please, can you clarify? Would you say that what you're saying to us is that private hire drivers would be placed at a commercial disadvantage, and would then that have a knock-on effect on those drivers' take-home pay and their business income? And am I correct in thinking that private hire vehicles, they are currently carrying more passengers across the city than hackney cabs? Could you just clarify those 2 points for me, please? Thank you very much.
Yes, I think the clarification in terms of data is extremely difficult. However, I can tell you, based on the data that we hold against the data that the hackney companies hold, what we can't tell you is the data of street pickups. There's no monitoring of that, so nobody really knows what that is. Suffice to say, though, there have been umpteen unmet demand reports over the last 25 years that have not allowed the number of hackneys in the city to increase, so therefore the numbers can't be that great, can they? Otherwise you would have allowed more licences, although that's nothing to do with this committee. I think what's interesting is that are we at a commercial disadvantage? Yes, but more importantly than that, more important than the companies and the drivers being at a commercial disadvantage, the customers, the public of this city are at a commercial disadvantage because of the rules and regulations that this committee puts in place. Not licensing, not regulatory, this committee. And that comes down to access and street access and manoeuvrability and the lack of, effectively the lack of respect for the private hire sector, who's constantly shunned, who's constantly pushed to the side, based on one factor which you've all heard coming up in this room on a regular basis, usually from the convener, but at times from other parties, that we are not wheelchair accessible. We, as a trade, perform the function of public transport. Whether it's a legal definition or not, that is exactly what we do. And we ferry around literally thousands of people a day with various mobility issues, various disabilities, and to be categorised as one specific, I think, is scandalous. And at the end of the day, it's not about whether or not the companies are at a commercial disadvantage, even though they are. It's about the public of this city being at a commercial disadvantage and having to pay more for a service that I can tell you probably is going to go up again in terms of fares when the next fare review comes in, and that other providers that are out there are effectively having to charge more than they should because they can't use the same routes as a taxi. That's it in a nutshell for me.
That's where the same... Sorry. This is where the Disabled Persons Act of 22 comes into, because you are actually forcing disabled persons who cannot use a London-type vehicle hackney to use a more expensive option. That's what it comes down to. I understand that private hire drivers who say a commercial disadvantage. For me, it's the passengers, it's the riders who cannot use a wheelchair accessible vehicle. is being discriminated against here. When you make your vote, please think about those passengers who are being discriminated against and the cost-wise for them to use a private hire vehicle. As I said, research has proved that they cannot use a London-type vehicle hackney. And we do carry wheelchair users, disabled persons, private hire. We do, daily, to and from hospitals, wherever they need to do.
Councillor Neil, do you have a question?
Oh, I do, yeah. So I came in today on a London cab, no problem. But my question is, over 90% of black cabs are accessible. Every Lothian bus has a ramp and at least one space, but less than 10% of PHCs are deemed as accessible, and some still deny disabled passengers. I tried a few weeks ago and had 6 separate Ubers cancel on me. Can you please tell me why you continue to claim that this system is a preferable option for disabled people? I would say that you're using us, and I really don't care for that.
I'm not using you. I'm not using you. It's the Disabled Persons Act 2022. And to be completely frank, right, and totally honest, yes, you are permanently in a wheelchair. I understand that, totally.
How do you know that?
Okay then, you can easily use a private hire vehicle.
Apologies, please don't write direct comments
Aye,
about
but
that.
I apologise. But what I'm saying is, wheelchair users do use private hire. And with you being, that's Uber, it's been a low fare, etc. Did you use the Uber Assist option for disabled persons, etc.? Again, they do not know that you're actually wheelchair accessible, and you probably didn't actually get, it could be the location where you live, you could be down in Leith, because no one wants to pick up down in Leith now because of the way it is. So there's plenty of circumstances that the private hire cars can actually decline. It's not because anyone is disabled, because we are here to do a service. We are professional drivers, and we're there to represent Edinburgh and do the very best service. And at present time, we don't. Disabled persons are discriminated against by cost. And it's lack of mobility, limbless, people who are limbless, lack of limbs, etc. Sorry, being so passionate, but I'm passionate for everyone to be treated fairly and the same, according to, not us, the Disabled Persons Act 2022.
You don't have to explain it to me.
Colin, can you please wind up?
Forget it. I don't appreciate getting mansplained or able-splained about transport. It's clear that their opinion is not going to change, so I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Councillor Lang.
Thank you. I've got a question, but just at the risk of Councillor Booth calling up, point of order on me, I'm not comfortable with somebody telling somebody else who has the lived experience of a situation that they're wrong. In the written deputation and also in your verbal deputation, you've said that the council is not complying with the 2022 Act. Has there been anywhere in the country a successful legal challenge against any local authority which does not allow private hire vehicles to use bus lanes on the basis of contravention of the 2022 Act?
Certain, I think it's on Edinburgh, Glasgow, Manchester, etc. London is the one that used London-type vehicle hackneys. So the vast majority I'm glad you actually said that. The vast majority have a mixed fleet to actually do that, to actually provide that service. And we'd be willing to actually take. That's an interesting one about someone taking to the local authority or council to court. I think that's a really good idea, and I'm sure we will be looking at that and thinking about that. It's a great idea, and I think it's a good one, because this is not about pride. Sorry for saying, you say about living experience. My auntie had a stroke, couldn't use a disabled. So
Colin,
I've actually had a Colin, I think you're digging a hole for yourself. Sorry, I'm passionate. I can't help it. I feel as certain members of...
Colin, I didn't invite you to speak. Thank you. Do we have any other questions for the deputation? Okay, thanks for coming along today. And I note that you did apologise to Councillor O'Neill. And I know you're still, I can see you're still emotional, Colin, which you do accept. I think it'd be good if you were to write to the committee afterwards, just to put that apology in writing. Okay, thank you. So thank you, gents, for coming along, and we'll move on to the next deputation.
My question to Sarah is, Sarah, I don't know if you were in the Garrel at the time when we were hearing deputations about the paper on bus lanes. And obviously we heard a case that was made from one particular aspect of the transport hierarchy. And I just thought it was important, given that you were here, to hear from yourself in terms of Lothian Bus's view on performance with respect to 777 bus lanes and also the potential impact if a very significant number of private hire vehicles were given access to those bus lanes.
So the Lothian position, we welcome the introduction of the 777 trials. We're fully supportive of the any proactive measures which will help to improve bus journey times, to deliver wider operational reliability and to encourage and to drive modal shift. We recognise there are competing demands on the road space, and I think as such any impact has to be very closely monitored as part of the trial. So having too many factors at one time to consider, I think would be very incredibly difficult to evaluate that impact. Does that answer your question enough?
Thanks for that. Councillor Booth says I'm not allowed to agree with you, so I won't. Who had a question? Who had a question next?
So on 7.6, trial of the 777 bus lanes. There is an administration amendment, a SNP group amendment, a Liberal Democrat group amendment, a Green amendment, and a Conservative group amendment. And we have Jamie Robertson to speak to the report.
Thanks, Convener. Nice to see everybody again after the summer recess. Before I introduce the report, I should also thank those that were involved in the written and verbal deputations this morning. The report being presented today, this is the first one, and it's the first standalone report that we've had on the 777 trial. It's a high-level report, and there is more detailed development work required on this project. But I am pleased to confirm that we've now allocated an internal project resource to the trial, as well as securing some external support to help us with the monitoring and evaluation work streams, which includes some data collection before the actual trial goes live. In order to move forward with the trial's development, we are today seeking the agreement on a set of principles which shall be used as a framework to guide the detailed design of the trial and also to help with the development of the signage strategy and the required orders. Convener, I'd also like to ask members to recognise that we're at a very early stage in the mobilisation of this project, but decisions today will enable us to move forward at pace. Happy to take questions, Convener.
Thank you, Jamie. As always, Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Jamie. So, Jamie, in my 7 years as a councillor, the advice that I have had consistently from officers is do not change the policy on allowing private hire vehicles to use bus lanes. What's changed?
I'll maybe take that one. So, to be fair, the thing that has changed, Councillor, is, I think it was referred to in one of the deputations, we had a previous legal challenge, some modelling that was undertaken, and we were asked a question of what is the council's policy. And the council doesn't have a policy, but the council has, for want of a better way to put it, custom and practice that we don't have private hire in bus lanes. And the discussion that came about is, why don't we allow private hire in bus lanes? And again, as was referred to earlier on, the answer is very hard technically to answer other than because we don't allow private hire in bus lanes, and there's been a lot of theories then around what would happen if private hire went in bus lanes. We had a judicial review challenge on the city mobility plan, as members will recall, which clarified the kind of where we ranked private hire in our transport strategy and the difference between public transport and shared transport, and that clarified that. But basically this was a view to try and get a more empirical view of, does it cause an issue? And I should caveat by saying the view of officers was not to try and bring private hire into this, but members need to realise that an ETRO can have multiple schedules. So in theory, if the worst happened, we can amend an ETRO within a matter of weeks. So it's not, for example, the case that we'd be sat there for 18 months of allowing private hire. If as we are allowed to do legally, if we saw within a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks that actually the hypothesis has come true and there is a problem for public transport, we can amend that ETRO and say actually the experiment, that element has ended. So it was a view of officers to try and bring, to be candid, some data to end the argument that we are challenged with ourselves technically by the private hire trade, understandably, and say this is why we do or do not allow private hire in bus lanes.
Councillor Aston and Councillor Booth.
Thanks, Convener. Obviously, the proposal is for the trial on only the 44 route, and costs have been identified in the report. So, if we want to proceed with the trial, it pretty much has to be on that basis now, because there's no real scope to amend the report to do the trial citywide. And obviously, my memory maybe doesn't stretch back quite that far, but Chris from eBug told us that that's the way the original greenways were done on a citywide basis, but as the funding is basically set, we can't do that at this stage. So obviously there's finite cash and there are competing pressures. Can I ask, was a case made internally for a citywide trial, and if not, why?
No, thanks for the question. It was a different situation when we were doing greenways, and the resources, as you've outlined, it was a different landscape in terms of that. There was a commitment in the city mobility plan, to do a trial of this. Doing it on one corridor is actually really complex, and it's a significant undertaking. I think if we were to trial it citywide, it would take much longer to get in the ground, because you have to think about, alternative locations for essential loading on each and every section of bus lane across the city. And because it's a trial as well, you are increasing the risk around, significant abortive costs if the trial is proved unsuccessful. So trial on this corridor, and there is, luckily for us, it's not really luckily, it's by design that the nature of the corridor is different. So it can feel quite suburban at one extent, or in a couple of extents, and it comes through the city centre as well. So we're able to test different sort of environments of how this trial, this change to the hours of operation will affect an impact on bus users and non-bus users. So it's quite a good proxy for the rest of the city, without going to the great expense and without having that huge, significant risk of abortive costs if you were to do it on a much grander scale.
A quick follow-up. I'm not sure that was very interesting and helpful. I'm not sure it actually answered my question. So I'm guessing that was a no, though. But my follow-up is actually, so if following the trial, it's the committee's will that we will roll it out across the city, have you got any kind of idea of what a possible timescale for that would be?
Just maybe add, try and give you a bit more clarity as well. A blanket approach to doing 777 across the whole city, I think we need to do the trial first and see if there is actually a case of doing this right across the city, and have 7 days a week bus lanes on every single section. If you take a city like Glasgow, for example, and I'm not suggesting we have as many different hours of operation schedules as they do, but they have 24-hour bus lanes, they have 24 hours without cycles, They have Monday to Friday peak only. They have Monday to Saturday all day. They have 777 bus lanes as well, and it all depends on the varying demands of any particular section or any particular corridor. I think if we jump to doing that all the city is 777, I think we'd be making quite a big assumption that that would be the best place to enter in, and I genuinely believe that trialing it along one corridor with a varying nature along that corridor allows us to maybe gather some evidence to then develop a evaluation framework of how it could be rolled out on other routes and corridors that would be potential candidates for 777. Again, I've probably not answered your question there. All right, okay, this time. I'm getting there. Give me another one and I'll try and hit it a nail on the head.
Okay, final question, Councillor Booth.
Thanks very much indeed, Convener. So I was slightly alarmed when I read section 4.2.2 of the report, which effectively says that there might be the potential to change the hours of operation of the trial. Have I misunderstood that? Is there anything you can say that would reassure me that what we are approving today is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week, and that will not be changed during the trial?
I think that was meant to recognise that the feedback that we've had from operators is that the travel patterns have changed post-COVID. So, we know that Interpeak is busier, and we know that the weekends are busier as well. But we know that maybe the evening peak bus priority is perhaps needed past 7 o'clock at night as well. So in terms of the monitoring and valuation aspect, we won't just switch off cameras at 7 o'clock. We won't just switch off the data at 7 o'clock. We'll continue to monitor it. And if there is a case towards the end of the trial, for example, that it looks like, there is maybe an option to maybe extend those hours, we'd be bringing that back. Either it's to committee or to specific leads within each party to do that. But yeah, that's just to try and say that the bus lane where we're entering into this trial is 7 to 7. But we will monitor the bands out with that as well.
Okay, quick question, Councillor Monroe.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. If you're monitoring this 7-7 and it comes back that actually there's no need for 777 bus lanes and it is most popular at the peak times, then surely that is enough data to show that it's fine the way it is, and if it's not broken, why fix it?
Absolutely. We're not prejudging the outcomes of the trial at all. I think it's a good... We have to recognise, that travel patterns have changed. We see it across quite a lot of modes, the rail industry as well. And this is in response to that, the feedback that we've had from operators, and it's just not Lothian buses, but we deal through the Edinburgh Bus Alliance with a lot of regional operators as well. So CityLink, for example, come from Glasgow, and they have a different arrangement for bus lanes when they come into Edinburgh. It's peak only. So, yeah, the answer could absolutely be, we stick with Monday to Friday, peak only.
Okay, I would like to move the report along with our amendment, which essentially asks that we don't include the private hire car experiment as part of the ETRO. And I think, I explained our amendment, just although it's quite brief, is that it's just about, this is a significant trial for the council, so it does make sense to limit the number of variables in that trial. And I think involving private hire cars would be a significant variable, particularly in the city centre section of the route, which might compromise the quality of the results we get from it. And I think that was that point was made independently when we had the ALIOs in, I think, item 7.1, when they were questioned. That point was made as well. I think the term factor was used in terms of the need to minimise them. But I do acknowledge the points that were made by the private hire car industry, and so what's important to note is the private hire car industry in the city is important and it's vibrant and it is a key part of our transportation system, and it will continue to be. And I was speaking to industry representatives in the gallery earlier saying that when private hire cars drivers speak to me, both via email and recently at my surgery, the issue they raise isn't access to bus lanes. Often it's just the sheer number of private hire cars in the city, and they see that as a challenge to their income rather than access to bus lanes. And I think that's probably a thing I would tend to agree with them on, and I do think as a council we do have a responsibility to enter discussion with these companies just to understand what level of service we do need in the city, but that's not for this committee or for today. We heard from Kevin, I think it was, that he estimated there was 160,000 private hire car trips in the city per week. We know from Lothian Buses data there's around 2 million trips from bus passengers per week in the city. This morning I came along Princes Street. It was traffic was relatively light, but there was still a jumble of vehicles trying to get along Princes Street, and some of them obviously are part of those 2 million passengers per week. And I couldn't convince myself, looking at the window, that adding private hire cars to Princes Street was going to make it easier for bus passengers to get around the city. And you know, and points of equality have been made between black cabs and private hire cars. And the conclusion I drew this morning, looking at the window, is that, you know, if it's a choice between having neither private hire cars nor black cabs, or adding private hire cars to the mix, perhaps we should go for neither, rather than adding more vehicles to the bus lane, because the more vehicles you add, the harder it is for the bus lane to do its job. Around 40% of the trips in the city, I think I'm right in saying, are undertaken by bus, more or less, but yet the amount of road space, whereas we have priority, not exclusive use, priority is absolutely tiny in comparison to that 40%. And all of us, you know, we use I'm guessing all of us, or most of us, use a bus regularly, and right across the city it's a much loved and used service, and I think we've got a duty to protect it. I listened to the point about Portsmouth, and a quick Google showed that in Portsmouth what happened before the trial started, there was negotiation with the bus user community in Portsmouth before that went live. And I think we heard from Chris this morning that he didn't felt that had happened yet enough in Edinburgh. So there's one key difference between us in Portsmouth. And I get the impatience that I think both Councillor Booth and Councillor Aston have expressed around why we're trialling this rather than go citywide. And in my recollection is the earlier consultations on this, whilst there has shown support for it, significant support for this, it's also showed there's a lot of questions from people about actually what the benefits will be, and also what some of the consequences will be. So I think that's why it's right to do this as a trial, so we can look at those questions. You know, residents say it will just increase congestion, and it'll actually make it harder for people to access bus services, etc., harder to move goods and services around the city. So I think it's right that we explore those points via a trial before we went citywide, if that's the conclusion we want to draw. And I'll just end by saying that, you know, Chris this morning from Bus User Group, he showed, you know, he set a challenge for us. He said that we've been going in the wrong direction in terms of operation hours, in terms of the length of bus lanes in the city. We've been going in the wrong direction for so long, and it feels like at long last, this trial, and that's all it is a step in the right direction. And given our, as Councillor Booth was touched on earlier, ambition to, you know, make transport in the city more sustainable, easier for people with local incomes to access, and also that important modal shift, I think more bus priorities in the city is absolutely fundamental to that, and so I really welcome this trial. And with that said, I shall pass to Councillor Pachenda.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, unusually I'm not going to go formal with this. I wanted to say a couple of words about it. I think that it's unfortunate because we're actually talking about a way in which to make our buses run on time, which is widely recognised as a way that you encourage people to use buses as well, to make that shift, because we've already dealt with quite a few of the aspects around how you make people use public transport in Edinburgh, especially making it more affordable as well, and the breadth of the routes that we're offering as well. But to make that really big step of getting people out of cars, we do need to really tackle this fact of making the buses not just run on time, but run faster than taking your car. And this is what this is really about. And I think that although some of us are not so much attracted to a gradualist approach on it, that by doing this we also show that we are listening to people in Edinburgh, that quite often people can be quite critical of us doing things in a very sudden way. We're going to trial it, we're going to show that it works, fingers crossed, and then we can spread it out to other areas as well. So I'm really pleased that we're going forward with this, and I listen to the private hire vehicles, but there are just too many private hire vehicles that if they're going to be coming into these bus lanes, that they can effectively work as rapid routes for the buses to move along. So thank you. Second.
Thank you. Councillor Aston.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. So, like you, I do have some sympathy with private hire drivers. And I get the feeling of unfairness they have in terms of the different treatment that black cabs receive. Obviously, we now live with platforms like Uber as a fact of life. As you said yourself, they are and will remain a key element of the transport mix in Edinburgh. And maybe the clarification that I'm about to give on my amendment highlights this even further. So the figure that I've quoted in my amendment of 49% compliance with mandatory training is actually across all taxi licence holders, so both private hire and black cab. And in fact, private hire compliance within that figure is significantly higher at 69%. With black cab compliance actually much, much lower. So I would just like to make that verbal adjustment to my amendment to reflect that within that 49%, private hire compliance is at 69%. I certainly take on board the arguments made by eBug and Spokes in their deputations about the value of bus lanes. And in fact, possibly private hire drivers may have a stronger case in turning their attention to getting parity of access to bus gates, or at least increased access to bus gates when they're used as modal filters, as is the case at Market Street at the moment. And given the fact that the number of bus gates is likely to increase quite a lot as we move forward with the circulation plan, that is possibly a more important element there. As I've already said, I think probably in an ideal world, this trial would have been done on a city-wide basis. Obviously, I take on board the response I've heard there, and I appreciate we are where we are, and I'm happy to move our amendment.
Formally.
Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Convener. So I found this report curious in that it proposes, certainly with respect to private hire vehicles, quite a significant thing, but didn't really include any arguments in the report for it. And I accept I was not at APM, I wasn't able to make it, and I could have made those points before. But it is a significant change from a long-established position that dates from well before, certainly any of us, maybe even Councillor White's, when he joined the council. And I didn't really feel there was a set of arguments made to justify it. I will hold my hands up. I am not persuaded of the merits of allowing private hire vehicles into bus lanes. And I've had these conversations in the past. I've been happy to engage. There have always been two big issues for me. One is around just the impact that adding a significant number of vehicles into bus lanes would have on buses and their reliability and the speed at which they can get from A to B. The other element for me has always been around the potential for confusion, because unlike taxis, we do not require private hire vehicles to have very significant signage to show that they are private hire vehicles. And I've always been concerned at the potential for confusion from other drivers in seeing vehicles that look like theirs operating in bus lanes. But I recognise there are very legitimate arguments that are made. We heard some of those arguments today. We recognise that there are other cities that do take a different approach to what Edinburgh does. And so that's why I have brought forward an amendment that seeks the opportunity for this committee to have a thorough, substantive discussion that is based on evidence and experience from elsewhere, so that we can have a debate and we can have a discussion about it. As I say, I am not currently persuaded, and it will take some going to persuade me of that. But I don't think any of us should ever be completely closed-minded to it. But I do think we would need far, far more information that is put before us today to even justify a trial. The evidence was there on justifying a trial for 777 on buses. I don't think that's been put before us on private hire vehicles. And I think if we were going to move down that route, I think we would need the kind of report with the kind of information that my addendum seeks. So I move.
Councillor Booth.
Thanks very much indeed, Convener. Happy to move my amendment. I would like to make a small verbal adjustment, which I have emailed to you and to the clerks, which is in 1.1.6, to remove the words "within one cycle of" and insert the word "before." It's been pointed out to me that an ETRO, in order to make an ETRO permanent, the decision has to be made before the end of the 18-month trial. So this adjustment aims to take that into account. We agree with the majority of committee that it's not appropriate to include PHCs in this trial. That's not saying never, but it is, as Councillor Lang says, saying let's see the evidence for that first. It's a little disappointing that the report doesn't mention the impact on cyclists. Bus lanes have a really important role to play in protecting cyclists, in particular while we still, unfortunately, have a wholly inadequate cycle network, and where the bus lanes allow some protection of cyclists, that's really important, and allowing PHCs into those bus lanes would significantly increase the risk and the danger to cyclists, so that needs to be addressed. But on the substance of it, on the 777 bus lanes, I would say, Convener, that this is unfinished business. As I mentioned to one of the deputations, I first brought an amendment on this in 2018. I fully expected that we would consult, we would come back, we would have a report to committee, and we would implement it, and that we would have a significant improvement as a result to the reliability and the journey times of buses. And it is deeply regrettable to me that it has taken so long that we are at this stage. I recognise we've had a pandemic and Brexit and all sorts of other things in the interim, but it should not have taken this long to improve our public transport. Convener, it may surprise members of the committee to know I'm an avid listener to Radio 4th and Boogie in the morning. And Boogie was discussing this issue a couple of days ago, and he concluded his piece with these words: "If you drive a car in Edinburgh, the council hates you." Now, I'm sure that Boogie is also an avid watcher of the council webcast, so I would like to say to Boogie, nothing could be further from the truth. If this report is approved today, it will be good news for drivers in the city. Because if we are successful at getting buses running more regularly and more reliably, we will get some, not all, but some drivers leaving their cars at home and making those journeys by bus. And that will be good news for those people like you, Boogie, who have weird shift patterns and for whom it is really difficult to rely on public transport. There will be fewer cars on the road, there will be less congestion, and you actually will benefit because you'll have a faster journey to work. So this is good news for everybody. This is good news for drivers, it's good news for bus passengers, and it's good news for the city because it will help to tackle air pollution and climate emissions and all of the other negative impacts that come with cars. So I'm delighted that we're finally here. I regret that it's not citywide, but it is a trial and it's a significant step forward, so I welcome it. I move our amendment. Thank you.
Can I second you? Thank you, Convener. I completely echo Councillor Booth, although I don't listen to Boogie in the morning. I don't wake up there. We've already talked about the city mobility plan today and need to reduce car kilometres, and I think it's really important we focus on that. and aren't distracted by unhelpful rhetoric and debate. I think it would be unfair to just sort of gloss over this morning that made myself and probably a few other people uncomfortable. But I'll just say the disability rights movement has a slogan that reads, "Nothing about us without us," and that counts with policy consideration. If you're not us, you can't really use us in an agenda when it works for you and then forget us when it doesn't. This isn't the only time it's happened. It happens a lot, but the reason I'm here is to call it out. So to truly be representative and supportive to customers of all abilities, tourists, locals, whatever, I think we should push on this trial and keep it as robust as possible, and I look forward to seeing where it goes. I second.
Thank you, Councillor Neal, and we're all glad you're here, actually, so well done, well done. So now we're on to, is it Councillor White? Councillor Munro, sorry.
Thank you very much, Convener. And just for the record, I do listen to Boogie in the morning, and I think Boogie has got a lot more listeners with these radar figures than we have of a webcast. And from somebody who used to work in broadcast media and in radio, who had to get up very early in the morning, there are no buses getting you to work in the morning. So I can see why Boogie, and also Arlene, if you're watching, why you have to get your car. And I wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of Boogie because he has a lot of listeners that probably agree with him. But anyway, moving on from Radio Force, our amendment's quite straightforward. I mean, the bus lanes currently work across the city, and the public understand it. I'm old enough to remember when Councillor Begg sat on the committee. I am old enough to remember the greenways coming in. I mean, you're looking at me aghast, Convener, that I am that old. But I am. And we think that basically, if you've got the public understanding how a system works, why are we changing it? But the trial does not monitor, this is what concerns us, the data or the specific proposals that delay buses across our city. And also, the trial's going to cost £80,000 plus an unspecified amount of capital funding at a time where the council has overspends and we need to make considerable savings over the next few financial years, where if you were to ask many residents, they will say time and time again, just fix the potholes and fix the pavements. And I know some may disagree with me on that, but I think every councillor sitting on this committee, they will have residents who say the same. So that is basically the crux of our amendment with regards to 7.6, and I propose our amendment. Thank you, Convener.
I'm happy to second Councillor Munro, Convener, and I think it's that thing, and it was quite interesting to hear Councillor Lang talk about the report not giving us any reasons why we would go ahead with this trial, other than to see whether it worked. But actually, you have to have a reason to want to change in the first place. And Councillor Munro's just pointed out we don't have that in the report. It seems to me to be an entirely political reason to want to make the change because some councillors have previously called for it. My impression of where buses are delayed, it's often to do with junctions and it's often things that the council has put in place. And I can certainly tell you from my own bus journeys that they're mostly delayed by things that are due to the way buses now have to interact with the trams and getting on and off Leith Walk at various points. So I think that's probably affecting everyone, and that's where some bus priority was removed to make way for the trams. Now, that's very good if you can use the tram, but it's not always the most direct route. I'm also going to say something about private hire car use. We didn't include anything in our amendment on this, simply because we're saying not to take the trial forward, so you couldn't take it forward separately. But I do think it's time that we looked at finding some equity for private hire cars. They've taken up the strain of us not increasing the number of black cab licences for a very many number of years. They've opened up
that bit of the public transport market to make it much more competitive. And I know from speaking to them and speaking to their customers in the past that there are some people who cannot use black cabs, find it hard because of the open space inside and find it much easier to sit in a standard saloon car, who have disabilities, who would choose a private hire car over a black cab. So all these things have to be taken into account, and if we're going to be fair and equitable, or we should be fair and equitable, we should find a way to do that. But that seemed to us to be an argument for another day. This is spending money on something that I think the public won't want at a time when we have consistent bus lane times and people understand them. And most of the rest of the time, even when drivers can't use them, the bus lanes are fairly empty because there's not much of a problem, certainly out with the city centre. And so this is unnecessary and at this time, therefore, a waste of public money.
Do we have any other contributions? I think, yeah, okay, thank you. So it's important to remember that the reason we're doing this is because when we consulted on the City Mobility Plan, there was significant support for it. But there was questions, that's why it's a trial. So it's not politically driven, it's something that the members of the public are interested in, particularly through the market research element of the City Mobility Plan consultation. So that's quite an important point. I mean, £80,000 is a lot of money, but when you think that, you know, buses in Edinburgh, Lothian buses, I think I'm saying their passenger base over a year is slightly over 100 million passengers in a year. That's a lot of passengers who are going to hopefully benefit from quite a small investment. And when I get the bus in, and by and large, when people from my ward get the bus into town, they're not held up by trams. They're held up by traffic as they come in. And what measures like this do is they make buses more appealing, as I think Councillor Booth, the unlikely lover of drivers across Edinburgh, pointed out, that this is about making buses more attractive to people by making them more reliable and faster. And so hopefully, if just a few people switching over to the bus because of this trial should make quite a big difference. So with that, I'm happy to proceed as follows. So accept my own amendment. The SNP amendment, it's interesting, and I'm glad it was clarified. I did look at that report last night. But I think I feel uncertain about making compliance with that test as being some kind of trigger. So what I would suggest is in point 1.1.4.2, replace until with noting and delete everything after ETRO in 1.1.4.3. Members have been circulated this, so hopefully that makes some sense to them, if not anyone else. You should have a copy as well, Natalie. Accept the Lib Dem amendment in its entirety, and also accept the Green amendment as amended, but unfortunately rejecting the Conservative amendment. So we agreed on that? Oh, you're going to vote? Okay, sorry.
Thank you. So we have two positions. The motion by Councillor Arthur incorporating the SNP amendment with some verbal changes that are agreed. The Liberal Democrat amendment and the Green amendment. And then we have Amendment 1, which was moved by Councillor Munro. Let's have a vote for the motion by Councillor Arthur first. It's 9, thank you. And for Amendment 1 by Councillor Munro, that's 2, thank you. That is the motion carried.
Which was now fast approaching 5 o'clock. So what I'm going to suggest is